So today I'm going to be walking you through mixing background vocals and giving you some tips on creating better vocal productions for your songs. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, go ahead and click the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so you can get alerted every time I post a new video on music production for songwriters and music producers. So we're going to be diving into a song that we started last week, but this week I'm going to be working on the background vocals. I'm using the main lead vocal and then deciding what I want to do to help reinforce that, but also create a little bit of a vibe and feel for the song. So I'm going to take you through the decisions that I'm making, the thought process behind that, and show you how I'm actually mixing each of those tracks. And hopefully it's just helpful to see some behind the scenes of how I work when I'm doing my mixes and recording. So let's go ahead and jump in. So this is what we had in the song from last week. So the tidal wave line is really the chorus of the song. And so what I wanted to do is add in some layers of background vocals that would help support that idea. So just kind of like this cascading sound of vocals that kind of emphasize that idea of a wave or tidal wave, something just crashing down. So I ended up recording in some different vocals. So I recorded 2 passes of the first harmony. And so let me take the effects off so you can hear those. So these are what these first passes sounded like. And this the second layer of harmony. So here are those vocals without any effects. So again, recorded 1 left and 1 right of the first harmony and 1 left and 1 right of the second harmony, and then I just brought them all into the same exact channel, and I replicated all the plugins from the main vocal and dragged those onto the background vocal, and then started messing with them a little bit. On the chain I have a compressor, an EQ, a de-esser, and then with the compression and EQ and de-essing, this is what those background vocals sound like. And I added in a basic reverb here, and then I added in a delay that sounded like this. And I wanted these things to sound really wide and just kind of pull back in the mix. So the next thing that I ended up doing was adding another reverb in, which is this Realm, I'm not really sure how you say it. This plugin, which is just a delay plugin. I used the default setting called Airy, and then it just adjusted a couple of the settings for the low cut and high cut and the amount of delay. So after I put that reverb on, this is what they sounded like. So I just pulled in a lot more of the top end, made it sound a lot more airy. And then I still wanted it to sit really wide in the mix. So this is what it sounds like before we put on the stereo enhancement. So they're kind of back there, you can hear them, but I wanted to make them a little bit wider. So I added in this stereo enhancer plugin. This is just a default plugin that comes with this is a default plugin that comes with FL Studio. And the only thing that I adjusted on this was this phase offset, and I just cranked it a little bit to the right. This is what that ended up doing. So let's go back here and I'll isolate these again and show you kind of how that affects us. So this is before the stereo enhancer. This is with the stereo enhancer. So it's not huge, but all it's doing is just pushing those vocals a little bit more out to the side so you have a little bit more stereo separation. And then when you put that in with everything else in the mix, it just helps support it. And it's spread out so the main vocal is still kind of the main focus, but leaves everything with that kind of ethereal, kind of atmospheric vibe, because it's just helping support it with that top end of the vocal, but also, for me at least, creating this kind of cascading effect of falling down, kind of like what a wave does. So it just reinforces the lyric a little bit. If this is helping you out, make sure that you go ahead and crunch the like button to tell the YouTube algorithm that you like it a lot. And I also added in just another layer for the main vocal just to reinforce that a little bit, as well as another vocal layer under that just to give it a little more texture and a little more movement. And so that's what these sound like up front. I find a peace in your embrace. So without those two layers, it sounds like this. I find a peace in your embrace. I find a peace in your embrace. I find a peace in your embrace. And one of the things to really think about as you're recording these layers, if you're deciding to do background vocal layers, is to decide what you're wanting them to do in the mix. How do you want them to sit in the mix? Do you want them to feel like they're in the back and really wide, or do you want them to feel like they're really up front and present, or are they just there to add a little more texture, a little more body to the main vocal? So just deciding those things ahead of time of what kind of a sound do I need from this background vocal, or what is it that I'm trying to accomplish with this vocal will really help your mixes and your ability to speed up your mixing process. Because once you know what you're aiming for, then you can start using the tools that you need to give yourself the mix that you want. So if you're trying to push this thing in the back, then you can use things like reverbs and delays to create that sense of space and kind of pull it back a little bit. You can use things like the stereo enhancer to push it left and right to make it a little more wide. You can also use things like saturation or some other compression kind of things just to help give it a little more body if you need something to have a little more body. But just deciding what it is that you want each layer to be doing to support the main vocal is really helpful before you get into the mixing phase. So when I was listening to this main vocal, I found a peace in your embrace. I felt like I wanted a little more texture to it, and I wanted it to sound a little more full and have a little more movement in it. So then I created a second layer of that vocal, then did a couple of effects on it just to make it sound a little bit different. So the main thing that I adjusted on that second vocal to make it different was I changed the delay on it, and then I changed the amount of the vocal, that second vocal that I was sending out to this reverb. And so with that second vocal, it just adds a little more movement and a little more texture to the main one. I find a peace in your embrace. And then I added one more layer, and this is a lot more subtle, but just to add a little more low end to it. And so on that layer, which is this one, I have a lot of different effects on it other than just the main that we started out with. I put on a doubler, and then I also put on flare, which is kind of like a panning modulation plugin. And then I also put on another reverb just to give it a little more space and texture. So then those three together sound like this. I find a peace in your embrace. And you can really barely hear what's going on here, but this is what the vocal sounds like on its own, that third layer. So it's almost more talking than singing, but it just adds a little bit underneath of those vocals to support it. So again, all three of those together sound like. Find a peace in your embrace. If you are frustrated with vocal production and you just want a cheat sheet that will help guide you through the process of vocal mixing, then check out the link in the description below, because I have a vocal mixing cheat sheet that's a great starter guide if you're just having trouble figuring out what you need to do or things that you can do to start a vocal mix. And be sure to check out this next video if you just want some help figuring out how to mix the lead vocal for your songs. And I will see you in the next round.